Okay, so today I'll be teaching you a lesson in racism in medicine. So in 2021, the CDC actually declared that racism was a serious public health issue. All up until that point, up until 2021, it had never been considered a public health issue, so that's very recent. There are some myths about racial physical differences between white people and black people. It's said that myth about black people is that they have weak lungs that can be strengthened with hard work. Another one is that they have large sex organs and small skulls, which means that they inhibit sexual promiscuity and a lack of intelligence. They are impervious to pain. Another myth is they have a susceptibility to some disease and mutiny to others. And according to a Dr. Benjamin Mosley, what would be the cause of insupportable pain to a white man, a Negro would almost disregard. I have amputated the legs of many Negroes who have held the upper part of the limb themselves. So just a myth that African Americans can tolerate more pain than white people, another example of that. And another myth is that they have higher tolerance for heat. And a good example of this was John Brown in a book he wrote called A Slave in Georgia, said this: the doctor ordered a hole to be dug in the ground. Into this pit a quantity of dried red oak bark was cast and set afire to it. A plank was then put across the bottom of the pit, and on that a stool. Having tested with a thermometer the degree to which the pit was heated, the doctor made me strip and get in. He then gave me some medicine. About half an hour I fainted. I was then lifted out and revived, the doctor taking note of the degree of heat when I left the pit. 3 or 4 days afterwards, the experiment was repeated, and so on for 5 or 6 times. His object was to ascertain which of the medicines he administered to me on these occasions enabled me to withstand the greatest degree of heat. He found that cayenne pepper tea accomplished this object. As soon as he got back home, he advertised he discovered a remedy for sunstroke. And then some more examples of racism medicine. J. Marion Sims, the father of gynecology in the 1800s, performed surgeries on black enslaved females with no anesthesia because it was said that they could withstand the pain, so that's why he would do that. And then also aggression experiments on black and Latinx boys were performed in psychiatric hospitals in the 1990s. And now some more recent myths affecting medicine today. In 2013, the American Medical Association Journal of Ethics found that black and Latinx people received inadequate pain management compared with white counterparts. And in 2000s, according to an Emory University study, 74%, this was in Atlanta, 74% of white patients with bone fractures received painkillers compared to 50% of black patients. And a 2016 survey of 222 white medical students and residents half endorsed at least one myth about physiological differences, including black people's nerve endings are less sensitive than white people's. Black people felt less pain, less likely to recommend appropriate treatment, and 1/3 believe that black skin is thicker than white skin. And then what I have is this survey, and it shows general, first year, second year, third year, and generally you'd hope that the ones who are in general, there'd be more, and hope that the numbers would decrease as you get to more experienced people. But unfortunately, the numbers stay pretty high, where you start with 23, they go to 21, 28, 12 to 4, and then 14 still believing in it for the fact that blacks age more slowly than whites. And you could just take a look at this graph and see the numbers. You can scroll down, look at that, and see how it's general, first year, second year, third year, and then residential for this.
Okay.
And then another thing to note is for COVID-19, more recent, nationwide, black people have died at a rate of 1.4 times that of white people, which is very interesting. And then some more, this is like statistics. Except for Asians, all minority groups are unrepresented in healthcare occupations that treat and diagnose. The healthcare professions become even more or less diverse as the required level of education increases. 98% of senior management in healthcare organizations are white. The current percentage of minority students being admitted to educational programs for these professions is not enough to meet projected minority population growth. In fact, this growth is expected to increase gaps in representation. So I have another graph of showing like social workers, and then it shows the percent of white versus black. For dentists, 74% are white, only 3% are black. For physicians, 67% are white, 4.8% are black. Just insane. And then another thing to note is the importance of representation in healthcare of people who see, so say like you're a patient and you go and see a patient who, or your doctor looks just like you, you're more likely to trust that person and receive adequate care. And the person who is treating you will make if they're not like, so say a white person treating a black person, they're more likely to make inappropriate comments or assumptions based on their skincare or on their skin color. So when you have someone who looks like you treating you, then you don't usually make those problems because you understand each other. And then, yeah, that's about it. So like, what would you say is like, what would you take away from this?
It's not surprising.
Not surprising.
It's, all of your examples are systemic, racism. It's to keep those myths and to keep those people in power, and so that's why they would start those kinds of hypotheses and rumors and myths. So it doesn't surprise me at all.
I think the one that really surprised me was a survey in 2016. It just seems like it's so like not that far away, and the fact that people are still believing in myths like dating all the way back to like the 1800s and 1900s when they really didn't have any.
Yeah, but that's our country, that's our system. It's all built on that.
Yeah,
that's systemic racism and how it is in our schools, in our governments, and even in our healthcare.
If you could think of any way how we could like fix these issues, what would you say? Just to.
Well, I think it's educating people, and unfortunately, it seems like there's a big push to not educate people now. So yeah, I think it's always about education.
So just education early on, so that you can learn the right way rather than just believing all these myths for people at the top are telling you.
Exactly.
That makes sense. Well, thank you for letting me tell you this lesson, and I appreciate your time.
Thanks.